Today I want to highlight and champion a model brought about by the thinking of B.F. Skinner. Published in Science years ago, he proposed a really useful model based on natural selection that's withstood the test of time. So if you're interested in why we do the things that we do, how we're influenced, then stick around. Welcome to the Daily BA. So behavior analysis, the field of studying human behavior, is situated on the theory of evolution and the first level of natural selection, which is the process whereby organisms better adapted to their environments tend to survive and produce more offspring. The theory of its action was first fully expounded by Charles Darwin and is now believed to be the main process that brings about evolution. This is our first level of selection, this natural selection level. And Skinner wrote about it as the story presumably began not with a big bang, but with the extraordinary moment when a molecule came into existence which had the power to reproduce itself. It was then that selection by consequences made its appearance as a causal mode. Reproduction was itself a first consequence, and it led, through natural selection, to the evolution of cells, organs, and organisms which reproduce themselves under increasingly diverse conditions. So that is the biological level being selected for based on the members of our species, things that we engage in, and that sort of compounding within our species over time. All right, so the next one, our behavior can and is selected by the consequences that follow it. Consequences does not need to have some sort of negative connotation here. In the technical sense, it's just what happens after we engage in some sort of response. Anything we do, just what happens as a result of that. If I walked in here and stubbed my toe on this desk leg, it would be the changes that I feel through my toe, like the actual pressure of it, right? That I sense, the pain that comes with it. That's what I'm talking about. This level is that behavior, the things that we do are selected by the world around us and the conditions that are occurring that we're interacting with continuously. Now, our field broke this down in two useful different ways. Skinner mentions it as through respondent or Pavlovian conditioning, in which responses prepared in advance by natural selection could come under the control of new stimuli, or through operant conditioning, new responses could be strengthened or reinforced by events which immediately followed them. So operant conditioning, learning through consequences such as me stubbing my toe or people providing me praise, things like that. And then respondent conditioning, which are these prepared responses that have been passed down due to their usefulness for members of our species. That is, they have value and increase the probability that our species will prosper, survive, and continue forward. But they also have the ability to be learned and altered a little bit during our lifetime. We have different names for these because the processes of how we learn and go about those sort of adaptations in our lifetime or across our species are a little bit different based on whether or not you're talking about operant or respondent conditioning or learning. The processes are extremely different, so it's useful to separate them, even though you might see some similarities because they're rooted or set atop this foundation of natural selection. These two areas have decades, if not a century or more of research, and they equip us with the ability to adapt to our environments, learn novel things, produce novel behavior in novel situations, that they are how we acquire and learn new skills and adapt to novel environments. So the second kind of selection is operant conditioning, the ability for our behavior to be selected for based on the consequences that follow it. All right, so the third level of selection. Let's jump into what Skinner said. Verbal behavior greatly increased the importance of a third kind of selection by consequences, the evolution of social environments or cultures. The process presumably begins at the level of the individual. A better way of making a tool, growing a food, or teaching a child is reinforced by its consequence. The tool, the food, or a useful helper, respectively. He goes on to say that a culture evolves when practices originating in this way contribute to the success of the practicing group in solving its problems. It is the effect on the group, not the reinforcing consequences for individual members, which is responsible for the evolution of the culture. So natural selection, selection by consequences, and this cultural level of selection in which our behavior contributes largely to the group, and it's not selected for based on our own world around us, but whether our behavior is selected for on whether or not it's valuable to the group or the community. Note these cultures can be very small, very large, totally depends. And this level is where I'd argue that we as behavior analysts, behavior scientists, myself included, have a really long way to go in understanding this cultural level of selection. It's one that's most just pressing with the social issues that we face day to day, but it's the one that we have some conceptual models of, and we have a little bit of experimental work with, but there's so many variables involved, it's just very, very difficult to understand exactly what's going on and train people in this level of selection. Most of the folks trained as behavior analysts are working on one-on-one settings, have extensive knowledge in those sort of settings, but the training and the experience wrapped and compounded with those other issues makes it really difficult at these other levels of selection. So what are the implications of this? Well, these 3 levels of selection, I think, provide a different lens to view social issues through. For anyone learning behavior analysis, myself as a continued perpetual student behavior analysis, I try to always think about these 3 levels and not just the knowledge of them, but how do I gain actual real world applicable experience in understanding these. Mastery is more than just knowledge, so it's something I'm seeking to understand more and more myself. I hope you enjoyed. If you think that there's anything off or you have additional thoughts based on this, use the comment section down below. Appreciate you to each of the people that support on Patreon. That's how I get to make these sort of things. If you have some opportunities, maybe support me financially, check that out. Top link in the description, and I'll see you in the next one. That's your Daily BA.